Bombardiers. James here with a special offer for you from Audible.com. That's right. For you, the Bombardiers, the listeners of Bombad Radio, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. Now, this week, I thought I'd recommend Star Wars: The Courtship of Princess Leia by one of our favorite authors and frequent guest on the show, one Mr. Dave Wolverton. And this is narrated by Anthony Heald. Now, basically, we all know about it, so let me just give you a bit of a publisher's summary here, direct from Audible.com. Darth Vader and the Emperor are dead, but the Empire lives on, and the Alliance must continue to struggle with dwindling supplies of cash and resources. Princess Leia, seeking new allies to bring into the Alliance and a new planet as home for influential refugees of Alderaan, considers a proposal that could tip the balance of power against the evil Empire. The Hapes Consortium, a cluster of 63 high-tech worlds, is ruled by the Queen Mother. She wants Leia to marry her son, the dashing and withering Prince Isolde. When Han Solo hears the news of Leia's impending nuptials, he reacts with shock. Han has always dreamed of marrying Leia, yet in spite of his heroic exploits, he feels she sees him as nothing more than a rogue and a pirate, unworthy of her hand. Now he makes a desperate last gamble to win her back. Tricking Leia into accompanying him, Han flees with her to the beautiful and untamed planet Dathomir, where he hopes to win her heart. Yeah, that's right. We've all read The Courtship of Princess Leia, but now you don't even have to read it. You can listen to it through Audible.com. Yeah, that's right. So, why don't you go over to audibletrial.com/bombadradio and you can download your free audiobook today, because even if you decide you don't want to keep the service, the audiobook is yours for life. So again, that's audibletrial.com/bombadradio. Go check it out.
Welcome, Bombardiers, to Bombad Radio. I'm your host, James. Unfortunately, Jeremiah couldn't be with us for this particular interview, but back on the show again, we'd like to welcome actor, former prize fighter, author, Mr. Jack O'Halloran.
Hey, what's up, guys?
Same old, same old. How about yourself?
Well, just working away, one day after another. We got a lot on our plate right at the moment, and it's all good, actually. It's all very, very good. We've embarked on doing a prequel to the book, which is kind of really cool because it's
really?
About my youth and my teenage years, and it was when I was younger in the 50s and 60s, the music mecca for America was Wildwood, New Jersey. They had an amazing amount of clubs down there, and every major rock and roll group played there, from the Detroit gangs, Smokey and Marvin Gaye and the Supremes, to Bobby Rydell and Frankie Avalon and Danny and the Juniors and Peon and the Belmonts and every major group. There were so many groups that came out of Philadelphia at that time, and like a tri-state area, New York, Philadelphia, Jersey, and then they had clubs for adult entertainment like Johnny Ray, and there were some great comedians at that time that were around, and it was quite an era, and so I mean, more than Atlantic City, it was Wildwood, New Jersey, where they all congregated, and they had all these, like I said, these clubs, and it was just two streets that were just lined with them. So it was like going to jam sessions, every day. It was.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, growing up in New Jersey, I've heard a lot about that from people that I know, family and whatnot, that came up around that era. My grandfather, he told me about that kind of stuff. My dad too. A little bit before my time, but I can still appreciate it. That's for sure.
Yeah, so it was kind of. I had a lot of things going when I was a teenager, and we had a great boardwalk in Wildwood, and by the time I was 15 years old, I put a production thing together with a couple friends of mine, and we used to make sure that the arcades and different shops and all were not vandalized and shoplift and stuff like that. And I was responsible for putting all the bounces together for all the clubs, and it it was quite an error. You know, a lot of things.
Sounds like a lot of responsibility.
Well, you know, I was that type of a teenager. You know, I enjoyed it, and I had a lot of fun. There's a lot of neat material for the book, and it was you know, the growing years of how I was falling into the pattern life of my father and stuff, you know, and I was doing it before I even knew who he was.
Well, see, so there you go. I mean, it's kind of like that. The apple doesn't fall too far from the tree.
Yeah, it was kind of. I was very entrepreneurial when I was a kid, so we're having a lot of fun with that. And then at the same time, I'm writing the sequel to the other book. So it'd be what we're looking at, and I think it would be the very first time it was ever done to have one person's life where they did a series, a television series, about my youth and one about my young adulthood.
And, well, there you go.
And do them both at the same time. That's never been done before. So it's quite exciting, you know.
Well, so now, when you're saying television series, so it's going to be adapted for television.
It's going to be
film?
both. It's going to be
really so television and
film. Yeah.
Wow, that's got to be exciting.
Yeah, because there's like several books I can do for the youth market, you know, and the youth market is very big out there. So it's a big deal, you know. So it's kind of. I'm really looking forward to and getting into it. It shows that as teenagers in that era, there was a lot of respect. The word respect was very formidable. And unfortunately, in our era today, that word doesn't have as much meaning.
That's very true. It seems like it's kind of taken a dive, so to speak.
Yeah. So they're hoping that, you know, it rejuvenates, you know.
Well, one would hope. I mean, I can tell you right now, you know, I mean, I'm only 30 years old, but even I can say, even though I'm still young yet, even like the generation of teenagers that are out now, it's nothing like it's the respect level is like nothing like how mine was. And you know, mine wasn't anything like the one before that, but it just seems like it keeps taking a dive. But it seems like it's so much shorter now, like so much shorter of a gap.
Well, you know, the biggest problem I think, and you know, I look at the generations that are coming down, and I think the biggest problem is that families, as a family, how many families do you know sit down and have dinner at night?
Well, I can't speak for very many, but I can say that mine does.
You know, that's a lacking thing, where parents actually look their children eyeball to eyeball. You know, I mean, when I was a kid, if you weren't at the dinner table at 6 o'clock, you had a problem.
Yeah,
you had a serious
that's how it
problem,
is.
You know? And there weren't that many working mothers when I was raised. You know, there were. I mean, my mother worked, but it never interfered with the running of a family.
Well, I guess, you know, I guess coming up now in you know, this day and age, it might be a little bit different, but I do try to hold, you know, true to some values like that. Like me and my family, we always sit down for dinner and whatnot. And,
you know, you have to have a period of time in the day where everybody looks at each other.
Yeah, exactly, like some FaceTime.
Yeah,
you know, that's not through a computer.
And you have a chance to explain yourself and talk about what you're doing in your day. You know, and it's really sad. It doesn't happen to a lot of people. You know, there's you know, it's just something that, and the word respect is not in neighborhoods. It's not in the street. It's not, you know, it's really faded away, boy, which is really sad.
Yeah. No, I agree. But, you know, moving along to the book, you know, thank you again for the copy you sent me. I think I read it at least 3 times. I actually reread a lot of it today, you know, just to refamiliarize myself with a lot of it because I really did enjoy it. But, you know, one of the big things, you know, me and Jeremiah were talking about was we were wondering how much of the book is fiction and how much of it is real.
80% is real.
Oof.
80%, maybe a little more.
That's an eye-opener. Because I remember, I think Jeremiah actually said to me, he said, when he got to the part about Kennedy, he couldn't stop reading. It was like a cliffhanger for him. And I was much the same way. I was like, oh, my God, is this real? Is this fiction? I have no idea.
Well, you're talking about an era when something was transformed that wasn't really real, The whole Camelot thing was all prefabricated, The whole Kennedy situation was invented. You're talking about a man who, and you go back to Joseph Kennedy, the beginning, the father, and Joe Kennedy was, and I knew a lot about him. I mean, he was probably the youngest and the brightest banker in American history. Guy was very, very smart, very, very clever, but he was also a very self-absorbed individual. And he was married to, and this is what people really never take a look at. I mean, his wife, Rose Kennedy, her family were the Fitzgeralds, and they were notorious highwaymen in Ireland and in Europe. I mean, they were, seriously, serious European gangsters, So when Joe Kennedy got into bootlegging, there was a lot of leverage he had for bringing liquor into the country from Scotland and from the British Isles, and his stepfather, his wife's father, Honey Fitzgerald, was the first. He was like the first important mayor and senator of the state of Massachusetts and the city of Boston. And if you go back through the first the bank up there, the Bank of Boston, there's been a Fitzgerald sitting on the board of that bank ever since it existed, and still is today. So
wow, so they definitely have the roots in.
It was yeah, and Kennedy himself was like I say, he was a president. He was the youngest bank president in American history, and he was a very smart guy, and he but he got into bootlegging, and he made a very bad mistake in the 1920s, and he had a warehouse in Canada that he was in partners with a few other people who were noted people in our history, and he hijacked a load of booze that belonged to a crew in Detroit called the Purple Gang, and that was not a good idea. They were rather serious gentlemen, and when you did something wrong to them, if they told you that you had a problem, you had a serious problem. And he got frightened for the first time, and it's when he ran to Chicago for help. And the man who was the Don in Chicago at the time was one of the first really organized guys. And he said, you're a real good earner, kid, but you go home, you belong to us. And he was under thumb to Chicago, and he hated that, man. But, if you go into Chicago, the Mercantile Building was built by Joe Kennedy.
Oh, I didn't know that. And
it's the only building in America he ever put his own money into. And there was a club in Chicago at the time called the Hamilton Club, which was like the political mecca of America. Mm-hmm. I mean, the presidents hangout there was, Roosevelt and before him other people, and a lot of powerful industrial people. And they had a lot of influence in the country, like the New York Athletic Club in New York, It was so Kennedy was sent by Chicago out to California in the 20s because Chicago controlled the film industry because they controlled the projectionist union, two other unions, and Joe Kennedy was responsible for. He set up 4 or 5. I mean, you'd really have to do some digging, but it's there. You could find it if you really looked in the archives. He set up 4 or 5 little Western movie companies that became RKO.
Really?
And then he set up the theater chain there were a group of Jewish theater owners that he put together, and it created RKO Theaters. So he set up a distribution element for the film industry, and he was responsible for a lot of things like that, and he got very close with the newspaper people out here, Randolph Hearst, he was very close to, and he got very close to, then he was close to the Gore family in Indiana, who were the newspaper people. And Joe was, like I said, he was very under thumb to Chicago, and he did a lot of things that were responsible for the creation of the crash. America was being sought upon by foreign investors who originally invested and opened this country up and built the railroads and the towns and stuff like that. And they were being pressed for a return on their money, and you have to go through history to understand how the country was evolving. And after World War I, America became a war-bearing country, and we started to manufacture war essentials, which was all business that Europe had handled before. So not only were we slow on the draw of paying them back their investment, but we were taking their industry away. So there were some very angry people, back and forth. And
I would imagine so. I mean, it's like all of a sudden, you owe the money, and they're waiting for them to get their money back, and the next thing you know, and they're muscling in on our business. I mean, what's going on here? If I were any of those guys in Europe, I'd be pretty ticked off too.
Well, you had at that era of time, the banking system was what they call a trilateral bankers. There were the banks in the circle. The inner circle of Geneva was the Rothschilds and the Montagues, and they were interrelated. The Samuel family, they were what you called the trilateral banking movement at the time. They aimed a short sell at 30 of those particular companies that were major companies involved in those banking circles, and the short sell was arranged by Kennedy, who knew the market. He was a very clever guy, and they were trying to change some things and stuff. So they aimed the short sell, and it went in place for a week, and it worked extremely well. But it made the market so erratic that people got very, very scared, and the object was they would do it for a week, and then they would stop for a little bit, and then they were going to come back and do it a week for another week. And in the interim, the people got panicky and started running on the banks, and the crash happened. But it didn't affect these people because they were sitting on a bunch of cash from the first week of short sell, and that only made them stronger to buy even cheaper. And they controlled, and there's where Kennedy got a lot of his wealth. He bought a lot. He got a lot of property and stuff out of people for nothing, when he was through with that, then the president had a great idea, made him the head of the SEC, and they rebuilt the SEC because they knew that Europe had to reinvest back into America, and they wanted on different terms. And when he got done with the SEC in 35, they turned around and say, wow, you did such a great job. We'll send you to Europe and you become the ambassador of America in England. And that's how he became Ambassador Kennedy. But what he did when he went there, he was told by some people in Chicago, again, while you're there, we want you to meet this guy and this guy, and we want to tie up some knots and unify some things over there on the business side of things, and you can help us do that. And he got in bed with the Shah of Iran, who was a gangster at the time, and they formed a bank, and they were lending money to Hitler. And the money that they lent to Hitler came back to the same group and was buying arms. And England stood up one day and said, hey, you know what? You can't do that. You're supporting our enemy. And they threw him out of England. And the reason that they gave for throwing him out was that he said that England was losing its democracy. And in those times there was no radio. There was only radio. But there was no television, and radio was not as it was prolific in a different way, and it was controllable, and the news was controllable, and the newspapers were controllable. So when Joe Kennedy came home, none of this followed him. It's just that he came home as Ambassador Kennedy, and and he went on to build this political image, and he had in mind for his first son, Joseph, is the one he wanted to be president. And he
really,
he was an amazing kid. I mean, he was really an amazing kid. He was a great air pilot in the war, in the First World War, and he Second World War. I mean, he was a real a scholar, and he was a sharp kid, and he was actually out of the service. He had 2 weeks before he mustered home, and they talked him into test piloting this plane that they were building. They were building a plane to fly into the munition factories of Germany. It was like a kamikaze pilot plane, but it was going to be automatically run. And they wanted to test pilot the plane to make sure that everything functioned.
Mm-hmm.
And the plane blew up, and he died, and another guy died, and then a short time after that, they scrapped the whole deal. So it was actually orchestrated to effectively retaliate against Joseph Kennedy. His first son was killed, and he had to watch it.
That's a shame.
And then they groomed Jack Kennedy to be president. So it's kind of the history of the Kennedys, and the part of the history of the Kennedys that's going to come out is he angered so many people. I mean, even Jackie Kennedy's father, Blackjack Bouvier, his father and his family were the Bouvier banking family from France, and they were part of the Rothschild family. And they were ruined financially in the crash.
Man, so it's almost like, you do one thing and then it just keeps tumbling over itself.
There's a lot of things that are yet to come out in our history that is going to crumble this Camelot, appearance of what was created, So
and I would assume.
So we touch a lot of that in the first book,
oh yeah, absolutely.
And we'll follow up with the second book, and it's just there's a lot of things that we have a lot of chinks in our armor, so to say. The history of the country that has to be looked at. There's a lot of questions that people want answers for, and they were never given proper answers. So it's time to do that. It's time to show that, and hopefully the effect that the book will have, and the effect of unraveling different things in the growth process of a country is to show people that the Americans have the right to say no, that they have the right to one of the greatest things that we had in this country was freedom of speech. One of the greatest things that we had was the ability to create a world out of nothing. If you look back in our history, the pioneers of this country created a country. I mean, America is the youngest country in the world to be the most powerful. You understand?
Yeah.
And a lot of things were created on the people of our generations that came into this country. Immigration was so different back in 1900 and up to in that era when people were migrating from Europe into America. And the biggest difference was that when you raised your hand to take allegiance to the country, you had to speak English.
Yeah.
So no matter where you came from, Russia, Germany, France, Italy, whatever country, the Baltics, you had to speak English. And when people came into America in that era, they wanted to be Americans. They wanted to come here and be part of this amazing growth pattern. They didn't come into the country to fleece it, to garner money to send back to the other countries. You understand?
Yeah, they wanted to come here and like be a part of it,
exactly
to help create the growth, to be a part of the story.
Today, what you have is a lot of immigration comes in, and they want to bring their culture in, and they don't care about the American culture. I mean, how would you like to be a teacher that teaches in a school, and you go away for your summer vacation, and you come back and 60% of your class speaks a foreign language?
I mean,
and
understandably, how are you even going to do your job?
But that's what happened in our school system.
Yeah, you know, and I've always said I'm all for, you know, being bilingual, learning other languages, you know, and all that. But at the same time, sometimes I wonder if maybe the country is taking the concept of a melting pot a little.
The problem is that you've had politicians one phase after another who have used immigration to capture votes.
Yes.
And there's been a lot of easement on certain things. It's almost more profitable to be an immigrant today than to be born in this country. You get more benefits. I mean, you come into the country as an immigrant and you get a credit card, a telephone, a job, a housing, school. You know, there's kids that are born in America that do not have access to colleges as much as immigration does.
Man, and while I'm all for everybody getting their fair share, something seems wrong about that.
Have you ever looked at that? Have you ever? You understand what I'm saying to you?
No, I do. I do understand.
I mean, this is part of what is going on, and people. I mean, I remember I lived in Europe for a long time, and I came back home, and I was in New York, and I went to dial a company. A friend of mine, I was looking for a number for a friend of mine, and I called information, and I got this. When I called, I got this voice pattern of well, if you speak Spanish, push 2. I said, what is going on here? You know. They had it adjusted for 2 different languages, you know.
Yeah.
And here I am. I say, well, what happened to English? What happened to America? You understand?
I can understand where you're coming from on that one. I can.
It was kind of a strange feeling for me, anyway. You know, have you ever been to France?
No,
okay,
no, I have not.
Let me tell you something. You're in France. If you don't speak French, they won't talk to you.
Really?
They won't talk to you.
Whoa.
There's parts of French, and I lived in Belgium, so I used to go into France all the time. You understand? And
right.
and if you didn't speak French, they would just snub you. I mean, you could be in a restaurant, and if you didn't know how to order food in French, you weren't eating, Jack.
Dang.
You understand
You're going
that?
hungry tonight.
I mean, and you're not used to that concept as being an American. Okay.
No, you're right. I'm not.
And you go to certain places, and people had a hatred for Americans. I mean, you have to. People don't understand. You know, it's actually amazing when you live and you've traveled, and I've traveled all over the world. I've lived in cultures everywhere. I mean, you go into cities today, and it's like the Muslim movement, where they are actually possessing streets at prayer time and shutting traffic down and have no consideration of your businesses, your traffic flow of getting from A to B. They just stop everything.
Yeah, that doesn't seem right. I mean, I understand they need to pray and do their thing, but
you know, to do that just to show that you have that kind of control is not right, man. You know.
No, it's not.
And you're having that happen in a lot of places. You understand? So
oh yeah,
it's
kind of like the concept of like with them trying to build that mosque right near Ground Zero.
Well, I mean that's like spitting in people's faces because
exactly. It's like honestly, really, like I get that, but like, do you really got to do it right there?
Well,
considering what happened?
They were responsible for Ground Zero. You know, you understand? So it's like a slap in the face. But there's a lot of things that are changes that are just totally radical. I mean, I have no qualms against immigration, had no qualms against people from other countries coming and finding the freedom that America gives, and the fact that it's a land of opportunity for people to do things. But our country's being turned into a third world country, man, and I'm not too happy about that.
And, rightfully so, because I'm the same way, totally. You want to come over here, and like, I'm all for immigration. I'm just like, I've always said that, like, if you're going to come over here, do it the legal way. Become a citizen of America, pay your way, do your thing, pay your dues, and, live the American dream. It's still possible.
There's too much laxity that goes on, and it's something has to change, and it's just causing a lot of, the thing that always, what people really don't stop and think about is every time there's disruption, there's confusion. When there's confusion, laws get passed that shouldn't be passed, things happen that shouldn't happen, because too many people are Bible goers of the news. The 6 o'clock news, people have their nose in front of a television, and they don't realize that that news is just programmed to win awards. They don't really tell you what's going on in the world.
You have to kind of go out there and find it for yourself.
They tell you
almost
what they want you to hear. So anyway, but so a lot of things that we're going to portray in the books to come are just opening people's eyes to understanding what rights they really have in themselves, and we're going to do that by showing how cultures grew together. How the Italian culture and the Jewish culture and the Irish culture and the German culture, how in the beginning they all intertwined and they grew in industry and in crime and in all facets, but they grew in a way that they didn't harm each other. They were trying to make a nation grow, and they helped each other. I mean, you can't fathom in your head that every single industry happened on its own, because it didn't. They had to have help on all sides of the streets and stuff, and controls and stuff. And, so when you intermesh things and when you take it apart and you look at it, you say, wow, man, there's amazing elements that cause this mosaic to work.
And, and that was like one of the cool things that I thought about reading the book, was that, like, granted, it was a story and it was, and it was entertaining, but at the same time, it's almost like you kind of learned a little bit about, how things kind of worked, and, knowing that, like you were saying, about a little over 80% of that is, straight up fact. It kind of gave you an idea of, like, okay, so this is kind of like how it went as far as the more, shall we say, underbelly of things went with, the whole organized crime thing, touching on that note, and how it kind of meshed in with the political and the business, and it starts to give you an idea of how these things were coming together, which is why I can't wait to read the next ones when they do come out.
Well, this is what people have. This is what intrigues people to understand and learn how the intermeshing and the growth of a great nation happened, And, it's like the funny cliche of organized crime, right? Mm-hmm. Because it was the first time that criminals of all nationalities interfaced and learned to work together.
Well,
you understand?
It's kind of like that whole melting pot of America thing.
All walks of life, everybody came together and they learned how to. I mean, you have. It's just it was like a mechanism, and it worked. It actually worked. I mean, the people, different corporations and businesses, all their goods were delivered on time, and they didn't have any problems, and there was a lot more respect in the streets, and people cared about what they were doing. It was a whole different era. I mean, when I was your age. And before your age, your mother could go to the store and leave a baby pram outside, and no one would ever think of touching it.
Yeah, nowadays.
Understand?
Yeah, nowadays.
When I was a kid, we played in the streets from dawn to dusk. We played in the streets safely.
Yeah, you really can't do that anymore.
You know, now you have to keep your eyes on your children at all times. You have to, it's such a changing era, okay, so to speak, right? And I mean, I remember 20 odd years ago, 30 years ago, when my youngest daughter was born, and we had a nanny from Ireland, and who took care of her, and I said, you ever go to a mall, I don't care where you take her, she is your number one priority. I don't care if you lose all the bags of shopping that you have. I don't care if you lose I don't care. That child is, you never take your eyes off of her.
Mm.
You understand? Because children were being snatched right, left, and sideways out of malls, out of stores, okay? And that never happened when I was a kid. It happened periodically, but it was a big deal if it happened. You understand?
Yeah, like if it happened, it was like, oh my God, national news.
It wasn't the norm, So so there's different changes like that. And when I was young, when I was a kid, nobody ever locked their front doors. And I lived in a Mecca city. Nobody locked their front doors. People used to sleep in the summertime. There was no air conditioning. People used to camp out in their front yards, even in row homes in the cities. They used to set up beds out in the yard, the little patch of grass that they had. They would sleep outside under the stars because it was cooler.
And nowadays, it's like you do that. And
oh my God!
You're afraid you're going to get stabbed,
raped, robbed. I mean, it's
shot.
It's a whole different. It never could happen. But there was,
and you know what?
There was freedom amongst people.
Yes.
You understand what I'm saying to you?
And it goes back to what you were saying earlier about respect.
Correct. People, and you have to respect yourself before you respect other people.
Very true. Very true.
And this element is leaving our society, and it's kind of scary for me to watch. You understand? So one of the theories of writing the books was to unfold all this kind of stuff and have people look at it and say, "Wow, man! We have the right to be ourselves. We have the right to help our neighbor. We have the right." You understand? There's just a lot of things so interfacing and intermeshing these books and doing these books in the concept of, I've had people read that book and say to me, how come they never taught me that in school?
Yeah, I did kind of wonder that, but then again, I guess you could say that I'm a little bit more ahead of the curve on that one, and I can understand why it was never taught in school, because nobody knew.
Well, it's just that, it's just a lot of things that they don't want you to know. You ever stop and think
well, they always
that?
say history is written by the victors.
Well, I mean, I remember when I was in school, if you weren't up to par in your schoolwork and you didn't pass a grade, they left you back. You repeated the year.
Yeah.
Today, that never happens.
Well, to be fair, when I was still in high school, middle school, grade school, they were still doing that.
That don't happen today. They push people through schools all over the place.
Oh, if I may touch on something, you know what I can't understand? And this was actually a bit of a source of a bit of an argument in my house. When I was going to school, even me, we had A, B, C, D, F, right?
Go.
Now they've got like E and S and like for excellent and satisfactory and non-satisfactory. And I'm like, well, what does this even mean? What grade did she get? Well, this means that, well, what does that mean? Tell me what it means. Yeah. And I'm like, wait, so you're telling me that this, and I even told my fiance, I'm like, wait, so what you're telling me is that this is basically an F. And she goes, yes. And I go, so you failed. And she's like, no, I didn't fail. No. I'm like, no, honey, we're not doing that in this household. That means you failed. You didn't do it. You didn't do it right. You failed. So you need to learn. You need to study. We got her a workbook. And now not only does she do her regular homework, she does the homework I give her.
Yeah.
I'm like, you're not going to do that. You're not going to fail. She's like, but nobody else really fails. And I'm like, well, I don't care about anybody else.
Well, you hear that statement right there? Did you hear that statement right there? Nobody else really does that.
Well, that's everybody else. That has nothing to do.
What they worry about more in school today is there's no discipline.
Yeah.
Let me tell you something. When I was a kid in school, if you got hit by a teacher, you never went home and told your parents that because you get hit at home for getting hit at school.
Yeah.
Why did you get hit at school? Oh, well, whoa, wait a minute. What are you talking about? You did what?
What'd you do?
So that respect was there, pal.
Yeah. Well, nowadays, they don't do that thing. But
if a teacher yells at you, they get sued.
Which is, I mean, I'm not a fan of, physical discipline from somebody that isn't a parent. Like, I will physically discipline my own child.
Yeah, but how many parents
But at the same time, if a teacher yells at the kid for doing something dumbass, you did something dumbass. That's why you're getting yelled at. There's a reason.
I'll tell you, when I was a kid, we were raised, I went to Catholic school, and the nuns, and we had classrooms. When my first 8 years of grammar school, I was never in a classroom under 70 children.
Oof.
And let me tell you what, you could hear a pin drop in those rooms. And you
forget about it. Nowadays, 70 kids,
and
man.
You learned how to
lucky
read,
to hear your own thoughts.
You learned how to read. You learned how to write. You learned discipline. You learned respect for other people.
Mm.
You understand? You were not so misbehaving in a classroom that it was so disrupted that no one learned. That was not allowed or tolerated.
No, it wasn't.
And I don't care what people say. Well, I don't want somebody smacking my kid. Well, then discipline your child.
Exactly.
If you don't want somebody to discipline your children, then discipline them. Don't have them going into schools creating chaos.
Yeah, that's very true.
I mean, you go to school to learn. You're not going to school to. Discipline and things should be taught in the home.
Yeah, school is not happy, fun party time.
When I was in school, we had a good time in school.
Well, there's nothing wrong with having a good time in school, but it's not like happy, fun party. Screw off what you want.
Oh, it's a place to learn.
Yeah, you go there to learn things.
So do you know how far down the scale our educational system has gone worldwide?
I actually do not.
We rank like 25th in the world, man.
So America ranks 25th in the world.
Yeah.
That seems a little ridiculous.
And our educational system sucks. Do you know how many illiterate children leave high school?
No, I do not.
Can't read or write? Look up the stats, my man. You'll be shocked.
Yeah, that seems a little...
Do you know how many people know that went to freshman college that couldn't read or write and were accepted in universities?
That doesn't make any sense. How do you accept somebody into a college if they don't know how to read or write?
It's called monetary existence.
There we go, back to the money.
You understand?
It's always the money, isn't it?
That's what it's all about, man. Money talks and bull
walks.
Yeah.
That one I grew up learning real quick.
You have to look around you, man, and take your head out of the sand and say, wow, man, what are we doing here? How could we be taking our freedom away like this? Why are we allowing it? When we have a right to voice our opinion, which we're losing. You're losing the right of freedom of speech here.
Man, I don't agree with that at all. Because, I've always said, if I got something to say, I'm going to say it.
Well,
if you don't like it,
let me tell you something.
Constitution.
The Constitution of the United States says that we are a nation born under God.
Mm-hmm. We
have freedom of liberties. Yeah? They want to take that all away.
Well, not on my watch, that's for sure.
But that's what hurts me the most. Anyway. So we're interfacing these books, and then we're going to put them on the film so people can see what they hear and see, and hopefully we have some kind of a bang-on effect. So I'm not doing this just to write about my father's era and people of that time. I'm showing how the changes in this country have happened, how things have changed, and not for the better.
Well, you know what? Going on about, the books and the films, which book can we expect first, the prequel or the sequel?
That's a toss-up right now.
Really? Oh, so
actually, I have to leave here in about 15 minutes because I have a meeting with we're sitting down discussing Macmillan Press on doing the youth books because they have a huge youth market, and we're coming up with the answers to that very question. So we're going to have to come back and see you guys in about a month.
Oh, you're always welcome on the show. That's for sure.
Yeah.
We love hearing about it.
No, it's
but
there's
are there any ideas on the film or the television yet?
Yeah, we're structuring it, and it's like what we've wound up doing is something that I wanted to do in the very first place, was to take these books and make like a cottage industry out of them, to where you have books, film, television, and merchandising, streaming, of where you're interfacing everything, game boards, the whole nine works. I mean, we run on a country of economy to where everything interfaces, and I wanted to interface so that it's accurate. You understand?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
In other words, people imagine people sit and watch Boardwalk Empire and they're mesmerized by fiction. So there's a bit of truth in it, but a lot of fiction. Okay, I look at Boardwalk Empire and I laugh because there's so many inaccuracies there. Mm-hmm. But people are so titillated with the era and the genre.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You understand? So because it was part of the growth of the country. You understand me? So if you're going to do it, then why not do it accurately?
Agreed.
So if we do series off of the books, there's a lot of history that's going to be taught through the television series that we're going to do.
Yeah, and after reading the book, I could definitely say there's a lot more entertainment in the truth than there is in the fiction.
Oh yeah,
crazy.
Yeah, positively.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm loving it. But, real quick, before you do got to go, I did want to touch on one other thing. I remember the last time you were on the show, you spoke about something about trying to get a movie studio going on.
Oh, we're doing that. We're just...
Yeah, any new news on that?
Yeah, we're the first studio is Culver City Studios, and we're just about to go into escrow to take down the first, which is it's an amazing studio. It's the jewel of the studios. It was owned by the Kennedys. Joe Kennedy owned it at one time.
Well, there you go.
It's a studio that did Gone with the Wind and a lot of the old great Mecca movies. So it has a tremendous amount of culture and history, and we're really my partner and I are very, very excited about the fact of being able to take this and use it as a stepping stone to regenerate and recreate the media, to make Hollywood the Mecca media again, and to bring the country up to speed worldwide. So if we take this studio down, then we'll build our Long Beach studios, and we're going to create a #1 media outlet in America again. And
that'd be great.
Yeah, because it'll be great education-wise, for jobs, for for creativity, and go back to making entertaining films again.
Oh yeah, because it does seem like films aren't quite what they used to be.
It's really sad because a lot of films are being done, and you have MBAs running an industry, and they all they care about is their profit and loss, and they're not looking at the creativity of entertainment. And they don't understand that if they look at the creativity of entertainment, it makes their profits that much stronger. And they've missed the loop, so to speak.
Yeah.
It's like I have a lot of people. Excuse me. A lot of people come up to me that have stayed in college to get a master's degree in business, and they say, "Wow, man, how do I get a job? I'm overqualified for this." And I say, what my best advice to them is to go get a job in a shoe store for a year and learn how people operate. Understand what our economy is about. Understand how you're going to apply the business things you think you learned in college. You're going to find out that they don't work in the real world unless you tailor them to work. If you take your smarts and skills and interface it with what really happens in the world.
Yeah, it's like you got to find that happy medium between what you were taught and how it really is.
You go to college and you stay there too long and you overqualify yourself, and you come out in the world and you find out that a lot of things that they're teaching you in those books isn't the way it really works.
What we call the working man's education.
Well, I mean, when you get into the world, what are you, 30 years old now?
Yes, 30 years
so
old.
you've had several years of working experience in the world. Is it what they showed you in school?
To coin a phrase, hell no.
Well, there you go. I rest my case, so to speak.
Well, on that note, Jack, since I know you got to be leaving us in a moment here, we'll let you get out of here. But before you do go, we usually like to give the soapbox to all our guests. Anything you'd like to say or plug or anything coming up. So, have at it.
Well, Culver Studios is going to be a great deal for us. I mean, we're thrilled about it. We're thrilled to be able to remold something back to where it should be, and it's a great place for me to set up to do the television and the filming of my written material. So it's like crossbreeding. I'm looking forward to generating jobs in the state of California and revenue streams, and I'm looking forward to opening the eyes of the public again to putting out product that will, make us a stronger nation. And I'm looking to entertain people at the same time. I think that we have in our possession, with the books that we're writing, be able to create films and television that will educate people at the same time as giving them entertainment. When you it's just like when you read Family Legacy, you not only were you entertained, but you were getting educated at the same time.
Yes.
And there's questions that people have been asking for generations that we're looking to answer. And I think that gives people the right to understand that they do have an inevitable right to be free. Okay. And they have a voice that makes that freedom work, and they have to use it. And hopefully with the things that we're doing, the prequel to the books, and we'll probably keep it in the Family Legacy genre, The prequel, I think, is going to be exciting for the youth of a country. I think they're going to clamor to it, to be honest with you. It's going to be a great wave to show that young men have a right to work and to learn and to interface their education and their work experience and how they learned how to respect their own self so that they can respect other people. And how that works in our society when you apply it,
Oh yeah.
If you want someone to be kind to you, you better be kind to them.
Exactly. It's always
it's a give.
You get what you give.
You take deal. And it's sad that there's so many people that don't have awareness of that today, and they feel that anything they want they just take off of somebody, and that's just not the right way to play. And so we're hoping that building this cottage industry through media and entertainment and writing, that we will help in some small way to have people understand that they have a right to stand up and say, no, I won't live that way today. This is what I feel is right, and this is what I feel my neighbors want, and I think I need to help my neighbor, and my neighbor will help me, and put a unity back in our nation, That's what I really. Yeah. That's the crux of what I'm trying to do, and it's. I think that when you get to owning a studio and owning a couple studios or something, it gives you a lot of more respect of people looking and listening to what you're doing and saying, and I hope to God that we do this in the right way, and I believe we will. I have a great set of partners, and we all have the same thought process, and. I care about my fellow Americans, man. I truly, truly do. I care about my grandchildren and where they're going to be when they grow up and where their children will be when they grow up. And I would like to help be responsible for some of the good changes that will happen to make us a stronger nation and stronger people,
Yeah. Well, honestly, it's a great way to wrap it up because as the book is called Family Legacy, and that's just what you're trying to do, to leave a good legacy for your family.
And I love our new Pope, man.
I like that guy. He's cool.
I mean, I think having a Latin Pope is brilliant. I mean, the guy, when you think that 40% of the church is Latin, and I just think that and have a Jesuit, boy. Oof, that's even.
Yeah, a Jesuit on top of it. It's like, whoa, who'd have thought?
It's. I think it's a great stepping stone. You know, I think this man's going to do great things. I really do. I think he's going to be a great pinnacle towards helping what I'm talking about doing. I think that there's certain elements in our life that are going to open up, and people are going to start opening their eyes up. And this guy is so cool, you know. He gives to the poor. He really helps the poor a lot. I mean, imagine the guy stayed at a hotel on his own dime, cooks his own meals.
Yeah.
You understand?
I was like, wow, this dude's like a boss. He's like real.
Oh yeah, dig it. I mean, you have to respect that. You know,
absolutely
respect that. And I mean, it's like our country needs a Harry Truman. You know, Harry Truman. Do you know Harry Truman never took his pension?
Really?
You know why? He said that money belongs to the people. That's not my money. That money belongs to the people.
That is definitely kind of a boss thing to do.
Bingo.
But on that note, I know that you got to go.
You have a great day, my friend, and please,
you too, Jack.
Tell Jeremy I said hello, and I hope to come back and see you guys real soon. And
absolutely, man. Anytime you want, you're always welcome on the show.
I love chatting with you, and it's just it's great, man. It really is.
And we like chatting with you too, man. We learn a lot every time.
God bless, man. Have a great day.